How many of you, when you saw a 2-hour block when we were going to talk about writing performance reports, you thought about gouging your eyes out with some pencils? Anybody? A few? You back there. Okay, great. One honest guy in the room. I appreciate that. Today we are going to talk about breaking the OPR code. That means I'm going to take the cereal box, I'm going to shake it up a little bit, we're going to pull out the decoder ring, and I'm going to hand it to you. All right, I want you to take your handouts. Everybody got a handout, right? All right, take your handouts, flip open to the back page. What I'm going to show you is a real performance report from 1943. It's the page that says Headquarters 7th Army on it. Take a look through that just real quick. If it were only this easy for us. So, anybody heard of a guy named Omar M. Bradley? Anybody side? Okay, great. Got one Army guy in here. I appreciate that, Army dudes. So, the Army guy, Omar M. Bradley, first chairman of the Joint Chiefs, 1950, big leader in World War II. This is his performance report from 43. His rater is, flip open on the back, who's his rater? Patton. Who's his additional rater? Dwight Eisenhower, yeah. Pretty stacking the deck on who's signing the report, right? So if it were only this easy for us, hey, Patton, how is his performance? Superior, period, done. Hey, where does he rank? Well, let me see. Flip open to the back. You can see, number 1. I know all his peers. Done. Hey, you want to say anything else about this guy, Patton? Nope. I've said it all I need to say. Signed Patton, signed Eisenhower, closed out, give him an Army, promote him to 4 stars, later move on. It's not that easy for us, though. We don't have Patton and Eisenhower signing our OPRs, nor are we leading armies across Europe, and nor are we 3-star generals. So for us, it's a little bit more difficult. Now, when it comes to overview and disclaimers, appreciate that introduction, Colonel Walt. I'm a disqualified pilot, still wear the flight suit every once in a while to remember what it was like flying 6 or 7 years ago. But due to some low back problems, I got disqualified, and the commanders decided a great place for me to be is, anybody got any guesses? To be an executive officer. Well, the Bureau came later. And then colonels decided that, and then generals decided that. So I spent a long time doing higher headquarters executive officer stuff. And what that equaled was writing, editing, reviewing thousands and thousands of OPRs, EPRs, and PRFs. So I want to take that knowledge and experience and help you all out, give you the decoder ring. A lot of times what we do, especially as this continues to get more emphasis, is we say things like, hey, you need to show impact in your bullets. You need to stratify. And those are principles. But nobody ever sits down and gives you the method. They just tell you these principles and then they expect you to go do it without teaching you. So today, we're going to talk about principles, but more importantly, I'm going to give you the specific methodology, a science, a step-by-step process to follow to make this happen. So, if you'll look at your front page, you'll see the step-by-step process. This is a guide I wrote. We're going to post it on the website here in your wing. Less than 30 pages. And this gives a detailed version of everything we're going to talk about today, word by word and all the way around. If you look down through your step-by-step process, you'll see in parentheses as we talk about the constructs and ways to form bullets. You'll see, for instance, it'll say A-3. That means you go to this guide, and in attachment 3 or 4, whichever one it is, you'll find a list of action words. You choose an action word and plug it in. You'll find a list of zingers. You choose a zinger, plug it in. That's the way it works. So I've tried to make this pilot checklist-like to make it as easy as possible to help you succeed. So it would be a great honor to me if you would, sometime over the next month, read this. It'll take you less than 30 minutes, and it'll reinforce everything we talk about today. Now, I want to also say that how many of you think that the system that we use today on the RegAF side, especially, to generate all these OPRs, no white space, anybody think that system is just a little bit ridiculous? Anybody? All right, a number of you. Great. Well, I sometimes think the system is ridiculous as well. But we are not going to talk about philosophy today. We're just going to talk about the way things are. So if you have beefs with the way things are, I got it. Talk to me offline. Today we're just going to hit with the way things are based on the new AFI. AFI 36-2406, a new version released in January of 2013 that govern all this stuff. Now you'll notice on my slides there's no background. There's no Guard patch or U.S. Air Force patch, and there's a reason for that. Because I don't work with A1. I'm not in A1. This is just a bro teaching other brothers and sisters how to write. That's all this is, okay? Based on my experience and based on what's written in the AFI. So my views do not necessarily reflect the Guard Bureau's views or Headquarters Air Force A1 views. I will defer anytime you need official guidance. Go to your FSS folks. Use the Higher Headquarters A1 channels in order to get that official guidance, especially if you're going to write bad stuff on folks. We're not going to get into any adverse actions or referral OPRs today. I want you to do the hard work to figure those things out yourself. So why are we going to write better? Well, if I am left to my own devices, I normally have two ways that I like deciding whether a guy's going to work for me, a dude's going to get promoted, a new assignment, a special recognition. And those two ways are this. First of all, I like to use my own personal knowledge of the officer. Hard worker, awesome performance, great briefer, whatever it is, I take all that knowledge that I have personally and apply that to the situation. Now, if I don't have personal knowledge or a lot of it, the second method I prefer to use is go to somebody I trust and ask them what they think. Does everybody else kind of do it the same way? And are those your preferences? Give me an amen if those are your preferences. Amen. Okay, good. So those are most everybody's preferences. That's the way we like to decide whether or not folks are going to get opportunities. And that's one of the reasons that I, as a RegAF guy, especially enjoy being around the Guard and enjoy how your system works, because you all personally know people, it's faces, it's just not pieces of paper, and you make decisions based on your knowledge of folks. And that's hugely important. However, there are times where there are limits to that system. Huge limits to that system, and just want you to understand that as we move forward. So if you go outside this wing, if you're not in the 172nd Airlift Wing, are you well known? Or are you even known at all? Especially if you go outside the state of Mississippi, are you well known? Are you known at all? And if you're not, that means there's going to have to be some other mechanism by which folks make judgments on whether or not you will get opportunities. Stat Tour program, PME boards. If you're going to go to in-residence PME, there's slots every year for folks to do ID and SD at the Guard Bureau, and they decide among the 54 states, territories, districts, who is going to go. And those meet boards that use records, special opportunity boards, job interviews, anywhere, especially when you go outside this wing. Federal recognition or promotion boards. So why this is getting larger emphasis among the Guard leadership is because the Secretary of the Air Force has made it really, really clear that his standard is one standard. And whether or not you think the federal dudes have a lot of impact down here, everybody gets federal resources in the Guard, so they get a voice, they get a say, they get to raise their hand and go, this is the way it's going to be. And the Secretary of the Air Force definitely gets that voice. And so he says, this is what a federally recognized 06 is going to look like. They're going to, in general, have these things, and it's one standard across all three components: Reserve, Guard, and Active Duty. And let me tell you what, just real quick, what's not going to happen as we look at merging 3-to-1 initiative. Everybody heard of the 3-to-1 initiative? We're taking three different components in the personnel world and trying to make them more similar. What's not going to happen is this. The active duty dudes over here, all my bros, are not going to look over there at the Guard system and the way the Guard does business and go, hey, you know what? We're going to go be like that because we think that's awesome. Does anybody in the world think that's going to happen in this room? No, it's not. I'm just telling you, it's not. What's going to happen is the RegAF guys are over here, and as we move forward, Reserve and the Guard are going to have to drift closer and closer to this system over here. Realizing and totally recognizing that there are a lot of things that are unique about the Guard and Reserves that cannot be like the 100% full-time professional force at the RegAF fields. That while we have those differences, the standards in general are going to apply across the board. So what we have now across the Guard over the past few years, everybody's familiar that if you're going to be an 06, a federally recognized 06, you've got to meet a board that decides yay or nay whether or not you get to be a federally recognized 06, regardless of whether or not you're sitting in an 06 position. Now, you've got to be sitting in one, but that doesn't mean it's an automatic one. So we've had several people at the higher levels sitting in 06 positions in the Guard where the board looks at your record, the board composed of a few active duty dudes, a few guard dudes, they get to vote, and they go through the records and decide the record is not strong enough to merit federal recognition to 06. And so this has been a huge hot. So just think, dudes across all different states and territories, sitting in 06 slots, group commanders, vice wing commanders, chiefs of whatever, in 06 UMD slots that the federal dudes say you cannot be in 06. So that's why we want to make sure that we beef up and put extra attention on OPRs. Does everybody understand that? So then this is why we're here, and this is why Colonel Wall has asked me to come down and do this briefing. Let me also mention that plans change over time. So for all of you over 40, don't have to raise your hand, I'm getting close to 40. Do plans change over time, yes or no? Plans change over time, yes or no? Yes, they absolutely do. So things that I never thought would happen have happened in my life, things that I never thought would happen, etc., etc. So plans can change for better or worse. So you can think right now, I'm a captain, I will never want to be in 06, all I want to do is quietly do my traditional guard tour and move on. Until 10 years later when all of a sudden you decide that maybe you might want to be a group commander one day. Plans change over time. Also, the people you rate, their plans change over time as well. So every piece of paper I fill out on myself or my subordinates, I want to make sure that that paperwork is as strong as possible, commensurate with my performance and potential. Does everybody get that? So that's why this is important. Now records beat mords, people do not. So you take all your training reports, all your OPRs, all your decorations, lump them all together, and that's the paperwork people flip through when they make determinations, when you meet boards, etc., on you. And we want to make sure those are good. And in my opinion, it is a tragedy, it is a leadership failure when the people and the paperwork that's on your folks do not match up. Now traditionally, here's how it kind of goes. On the RegAF side, awesome records, sometimes the dude isn't as awesome as the paperwork says. That's kind of how it goes. I roll over here to the guard as I get more and more experience around guardsmen, and I see great folks, awesome folks, but their paperwork stinks. It just sucks. I mean, their OPRs could not get them promoted to major on the RegAF side. And so that's what we want to correct. So the process step by step. We're going to show leadership, performance, stratification, support, and all of that adding up to show potential for promotion later on, for bigger and better things in whatever kind of opportunities and whatever ways they come about. So that's what we're going to do with this OPR process. So step one, we're going to make a plan. So let me tell you what oftentimes is the first mistake. Oftentimes the first mistake in the OPR process is deciding that the OPR process starts 2 weeks prior to the OPR closing out. Wrong! That's not when the process starts. The process starts on day one of the rating period. And so that means then that we have to take preparations all the way through the year in order to write strong reports. That's what the RegAF guys are doing. It's this big process that occurs on their side. So when I have a ratee, I start out by reviewing SERFs, all the records that are on there, their previous OPRs, decorations. I take an opportunity to look at their training reports, any letters of evaluation from the previous rater. I also take an opportunity to determine the officer's trajectory. Are they a fast-burning dude? Are they slow-burning? Are there things that perhaps are missing in their records? Maybe they have some weaknesses or gaps. Maybe they should be a major weapons system IP by now, but they're not. Well, why is that? Just a question to ask, log away for later. Maybe they have some adverse actions in their records, failed a PT test. Those are things I review so I have a complete sight picture of the officer. Now I map out the next career steps. I definitely can see around the room, perhaps the face is, this is a lot of work. And the answer is, yes, it is a lot of work. Absolutely, it's a lot of work. And the question you have to ask yourself as we dig into this is, are your people worth it? So let me ask you again, are your people worth it? Are our people worth it? Yes, they are worth it. They are worth the extra work. And so that's why we want to put an emphasis on setting our folks up for success, maximizing their career potential as we move along. So mapping out next career steps, and then deciding how we can help our ratees get there. Do I need to put them in for an award, maybe a decoration, maybe a CGO of the year? Perhaps do I need to push them for an upgrade early to aircraft commander, or maybe on the maintenance side, some kind of upgrade? Do I need to set them up better for the next job? So after I get all that stuff in my mind early on as I begin the rating period, then I get ready to move on. And let me just say that this step is especially important in your DSG's OPRs. So the part-time dudes, it is surprising to me the challenge it is to take, let's say for instance, when I supervised a bunch of lieutenants when I was a flight commander, to take a lieutenant and go, all right, we're going to take 1/12 of your total performance throughout the year, about 30 days worth, and I'm going to write a total and complete OPR on those 30 days. That would be challenging. And the way we overcome those challenges for our part-time folks is by making a plan and proactively executing a plan throughout the year, so when they're here, we maximize the things they're doing. We make sure they are touching special projects and things like that that we can work into OPR bullets. So that's how this is important. So after you make a plan, you're going to provide the expectations and feedback. Let you read the Dilbert there at the bottom. All right, so you have expectations and feedback. This can sometimes be a challenging thing. This is a required thing to do. You take an Air Force Form 724, you fill it out. It's not an official permanent part of the record, but it's a way to communicate expectations. And you want to set clear, specific expectations up front for all your ratees, officer and enlisted. A lot of this stuff will apply across the board, and I know many of you in here supervise enlisted, or at least you're the additional rater for a number of enlisted personnel as well. Setting clear expectations, it's a very important thing, because if you don't, then success becomes a moving target for the ratee, and nobody really knows what you want, so they don't know how to give you what you want in order to meet your expectations. You also want to make sure that you discuss the ratee's career goals and future. What I found is when I sit down on day one and I have the initial feedback session and I say, all right, here's what's in your record. I've reviewed the entire thing. I've put some thought behind what your next career steps should be, and here's my thoughts on it. What are your career goals? What do you want to do? The ratee automatically gets the sense that I care a lot about his or her future. I care a lot about taking care of him, and I am going to take care of him. And that sets the tone for the ratee-rater relationship for the entirety of the supervision period. Now you also, as you get down into the year, you have the midterm feedback that you're going to give, which note the date on that. You'll put it on the OPR form a little bit later on. I like to make that feedback constructive with specific examples. And if there's a warning shot across the bow that needs to occur, you're not meeting standards, you're not meeting my expectations, you're setting yourself up for a weak OPR because of your performance, those type of things should never be a surprise when a ratee ends up getting their EPR. No one should ever look at their EPR and go, man, this is a total shock. I'm so surprised that I didn't get stratified, or I'm very surprised that this is a very weak report. That should never be a shock if appropriate channels of feedback are taking place. So this is step 2, expectations feedback. Now we move into collecting data, step number 3. So this is now you're getting down to a month prior to when the report closes out, 6 weeks prior, and it's time to start writing this thing. The first thing you're going to do is do self-documentation. So that means for your ratees, when I have ratees, I say, you will provide me inputs. I didn't say you're going to write the EPR or OPR for me. I said, you are going to provide me inputs, which means you're going to keep track of what you're doing so you can help me generate a very strong report for you. Now, when you have 20, 25 folks, like when I was a flight commander, 25 lieutenants roaming around, guess what? I can't keep track of 25 folks and every single thing they're doing. So I need some help from them, and also to use it as a teaching point to help them show how to craft OPRs so we breed the next generation of writers and officers in our organizations. So expectation up front, take the self-documentation. Next, I take completed packages. How many people in here have written an awards package before? An NCO of the year, CGO of the year, okay, a number of you have. That's not double work, because what you do is you take those bullets that are on an award citation and you throw them in to the OPR. They become the OPR bullets. That's how it works. And awards are a very important thing to distinguish folks from their peers, both on the officer and enlisted side. Any letters of evaluation, perhaps from the deployed environment or from a previous rater, any training reports like from SOS and residence if you happen to do that, take all that information, review it, and use it when it comes to writing the report. Now, your notes, what I do is I keep a Word document on my desktop. And I have all 20 ratees' names there, and anytime any significant project or thing they do comes up, I just make a little note on it. And I keep a Word document for myself. So even at the Guard Bureau now, as I work on various projects, I just make small notes so I can go back a year from now and remember things I've done so I can craft a strong OPR or help my rater craft a strong OPR and do the same for my ratees. So your notes are an important source. Now we talked about hooking up the part-time guys. So part-time dudes, which is the majority of your organization that aren't here day in and day out, this is an important part of making sure you have meat and substance that are going to go into the OPRs. And let me tell you, there's a number of general officers that did a whole lot of part-time work up here at the higher levels. So Major General Etter, who's going to go be the 1st Air Force Commander, 3-star, he spent about 23, 24 years as a part-time guy. I don't know how his OPRs looked, but his OPRs had to look good enough to get him to the very senior levels and be competitive to communicate meaning of what he's done at the federal system to be nominated by the President for his 3rd star. So for the part-time guys, it doesn't mean that just because you're not here most of the time, you can't have meaningful reports. And part of the ways to help fill up those lines is by unit bullets. So anybody in here helped write a team award, a Squadron of the Year award, Wing, Vernor award. If you've done some of that, or at least provided input into those, when your squadron, group, wing has some kind of big team award, there's a lot of bullets that go on that Air Force Form 1206. And those bullets can be used, siphon them off, and filter them into your OPRs and your EPRs as well, for that matter. So when you win awards, when you have team accomplishments, what I make sure is, if I were doing this, I would make sure my part-time guys show up. If there's some kind of team accomplishment, I make sure that there's just something that they're touching in terms of that project or that accomplishment that I can relate back to the OPR and provide meaning. Even if it's doing a promotion ceremony and they help set up chairs, set up the room for 15, 20 minutes. There's something that we could give meaningful bullets instead of just writing a bunch of fluff that doesn't say anything. Now, last source of collection of the data is going to be OPRs and info from other folks. So we crank out tens of thousands of OPRs in the Air Force every year. So there's no need to totally reinvent the wheel. If you sit down with a blank sheet of paper and just go to it, I'm just here to tell you, you don't have enough experience to do that to where you're going to be happy at the end. You need to start out with some other ideas and make sure you do the data collection thing well so you don't frustrate yourself when you try to fill up a blank sheet of paper. Now, how many of you have deployed with the REGAF side by side in the past 5 years? Let me see a show of hands. How many of you have sat beside a REGAF dude in some kind of deployed environment? A number of you. Let me tell you, whatever you did in the deployed environment was probably pretty similar to what the REGAF guy sitting beside you was doing. And over there, those dudes are figuring out how to capture it and make themselves sound glowing. So what you want to do is go, hey man, it's a total force. Why don't you total force me up some OPR bullets? You know what I'm saying? And so you need to tap in to the sources of where we have good REGAF examples of the work you're doing. If you have buddies out there in the REGAF that are holding the same jobs, guys at Charleston, the C-17 wing, go, hey man, how are you all capturing the various things you're doing, and use that cross-tail to help you out. So, step number 4 now, if you'll flip open to page 2. Page 2, so page 1 highlights the process. Page 2 is an example form with the methodology I use when I sit down to write OPRs. So first of all, you're going to fill in the top part, and there's a lot of rules that govern how this should look. And there's a table in the AFI that goes through and gives you more specific information if you need it. I'm going to teach you how to write today instead of spending a lot of time on giving you the nuances of all this stuff, but this should in general match your OPR notice. So the stuff that is in the computer, the stuff that says this is your duty title, that all should match. Oh, you want to crank off that? Thanks. In the reviewer section down below, so I cut out the middle part because we're going to talk about that next. You're going to fill in your raters, your additional raters and reviewers, their information, their duty titles, and social security numbers. By the way, if you look down at functional examiner, Air Force advisor, you all aren't acquisitions guys, nor are you in a joint unit where your boss is not an Air Force wearing uniform dude. And so normally that block is not used for the purposes of OPRs written in this wing, as well as EPRs. That block will most of the time never be used. You flip open on the back. Let me just make an assessment. I was reviewing an OPR when we changed the form back in 2008, 2009, and a sharp lieutenant colonel had all the X's checked all the way down there. I said, "What are you doing, man?" And so remember, an X, if you check the block, it means you do not meet the standard. So make sure none of those blocks are checked on the back. You see in the remarks section, this is a place where you put acronyms. You want to use acronyms. And so my technique is to use a lot of acronyms to fill up the entire block. If I have more acronyms, which I normally do, than the block will hold, I take off the most common ones. So I don't put in here NCO or CSAF. Those are common ones that everyone should know. By the way, what is the target audience for an OPR? Who? What rank should be the target audience for your OPR? 06. 06, but what kind of 06? A commander 06 in your career field or outside your career field? Outside your career field. So paint this picture. Remember, RegAF guys, major lieutenant, colonel, they meet boards all the way around, and the boards are systematically set up to be 06s from different career fields, general officers from different career fields, so no one single career field has the corner on getting any unfair type of advantage. So your target audience when you sit down to write an OPR is an 06. I would challenge you to say even a RegAF 06 who's outside of your career field. That means you're a math guy, a mobility Air Forces dude, you're an aircrew guy. You want to communicate to the acquisitions dude that's never seen or been on an airplane, but they're an Air Force 06. That's the kind of guy you want to communicate to. And you want to be able to make sure that you communicate to them when they're tired. So not on day one when they're reviewing record number 3, you want to communicate them on day 5 when they're reviewing record number 567, and they have to look at your record and assign a score to it and determine the rest of your life. That's how you want to assess how you write OPRs. So with that context, looking at FedRec boards and other opportunities, that's how we want to move into how specifically we're going to write these things. So first of all, we're going to write those 4 duty description blocks, bullets at the top. Now, you don't want to waste the space. So if you count how many bullets an OPR has, it has 4 duty description bullets, 6 Raider bullets, and 4 additional Raider bullets. Now, how many of you think it's just this side of retarded, almost hee-haw funny, that we make no white space on the reform almost an unwritten requirement? Anybody think that's kind of ridiculous, that no white space allowed is kind of ridiculous? Okay, doesn't matter. I'm just telling you that's the way it is. Because here's what message you send when you put even a word's worth of white space at the end of your bullets. It says, you as the Raider were too lazy or didn't care enough about this guy being awesome, didn't think enough of this guy or gal to fill up the block. Or worse, it sends the message that you didn't do enough during the rating period to fill up the report. That's a very limited space, and that's how you have to think of it. So what you want to do is you want to think about making radio calls. So here's a radio call, for those that, especially for those who are non-rated. Cider 3-4, gear down, full stop, runway 3-5. I put in no extra verbiage. It was very choppy, to the point, and then I moved on. Very, very, very punctual. Guard OPRs, oftentimes, as I read through them, are very conversational in tone. It's like I'm reading a William Faulkner novel, whereas stream of consciousness, and you just keep on and on and on, and there's lots of words, and there are lots of extra words that don't need to be there. So you want to think about cutting out all the chaff, and you want to get right down to the point, so meat and substance and specifics are what govern our bullets. Now, do we have the personnelist in here? Oh, Ron's here again. Okay. Stand up, Ron. Give Ron a hand. Our resident personnelist. Ron, I just want to tell you, as I told you this morning, I am ticked off at you. I am ticked off at Ron Haygood because he, as a personnelist weenie, has only given me 14 lines total to sum up in an entire year's worth of work the quintessential awesomeness of this guy right here. And it just cannot be done in 14 bullets. You have ticked me off. So that is the mentality you want to go into when you write an OPR. Let me tell you what your current mentality is for most of you. Your current mentality is, oh dude, I got to fill the white space. Let's just figure out how many words we can make. Let's make up some good words. Maybe I'll put in like pure platinum or golden touch or silver surfer. I don't know. I'll say something. It'll fill up the white space and everybody will be happy. And then no white space equals strong report. Wrong. You want to think in a totally different mentality, not just filling the white space, but being ticked off that you have done so much stuff. You have accomplished so much in the year that it's difficult to fill the form because you have so much stuff to pack in there. So that's the kind of mentality you want to be in when you write, and that's the RegAF mentality. So when they look at your reports, when a RegAF 06 sitting on your FedRec board reads your reports, that's the type of reports he's used to reading. And when he doesn't see that, it makes him wonder whether that was on purpose or whether somebody's trying to send him a message. Because when reports are written weekly on the RegAF, it's normally intentionally, and it's normally meant to send a negative message to board members. So acronyms and abbreviations. Use them often, use them liberally. I use several all the time. And here's what you want to do. You want to apply the 1 second rule. And this is mostly for RegAF guys, because this is what RegAF guys do. They'll take about 5 acronyms, they'll cram them all together, and it will be so packed of acronyms and abbreviations that the sentence loses clarity and nobody understands what folks are trying to say. So if I read a sentence and I can't understand what you're trying to say in 1 second, the sentence should be rewritten, the bullet should be rewritten. However, that's not your problem normally. That's not the guard problem. The guard problem is spelling out everything. So you'll spell out Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force. It takes up half the line. When you could have used 5 letters, you use 30 characters. So you want to make sure that we abbreviate, especially common things, all the way around and use acronyms. Now, you also want to make sure that when you go down to write the duty description bullets, that you use this format, action word. So, let me give you some of my favorite action words, especially as officers, we're leaders, and everything that we do as officers, we should foot stomp, we should hammer, we should highlight leadership. Leadership, leadership, leadership. That's what we should focus on. And so I like, as my favorite action words, directs, leads, commands, supervises, spearheads, directs. I may have said that twice. Use it twice. So anyway, that's the way it goes. Those are strong action words, and those are how you want to start out sentences. You want to quantify people, resources, money, how much does everything you cost, and how much does it cost for all the resources that you and equipment that you supervise, and the scope of your organizations, how many airplanes, all those sorts of things. So the Air Force is the most technical, data-driven, analysis-hungry service. So we want to make sure that we use lots of numbers and we get down to lots of specifics. So oftentimes when I read these reports, there'll just be a lot of fluff and there won't be a lot of meat. And you use numbers and specifics to get down to exactly how this should be. So let me give you just a few examples here. Always a danger showing examples, but because you'll say, this is just the way it's going to be, this is the way it's got to be, this is the ultimate, and this is not. These are just good ones. I encourage you to look at your own duties and sum them up accordingly. But here is one where, and normally on the RegAF side, for every aviator, there's an office job, even for co-pilots, there's an office job that goes with it because we're trying to show total scope of duties and officership. And so this is normally how RegAF guys make it roll. Here you see top 3 bullets are talking about flying duties. Bottom bullet, talking about an office job. And then as you get more senior, the flying stuff begins to go to the background and the desk job begins to come to the front. So if you're a lieutenant colonel, DO, you should have 3 bullets that talk about you being a DO. And then your bottom line should tell me that you're a C-17 IP or EP, whichever one you are. Now, you see on the next bullet here, this is one totally outside of your career field, but just to show that it's the same stuff. This is a space geek. Then this dude is a flight commander for the GPS mission analysis. And so he does a great job. These space guys, and I love space guys. So one of my buddies here, when he was a flight commander, this is his duty description. Notice the top line. The top line very clearly sums up who he leads, how many people he leads, and what their mission is. You'll notice also that the space guys always have the trump card when it comes to money because all their stuff is so freaking expensive. So here he is, DOD's $3.5 billion satellite constellation, DOD's largest. If this guy didn't show up to work, the whole GPS system would totally fail and the planet would shut down. Now that sounds a little bit crazy, but that's how that's how strongly the RegAF dudes write stuff. So you never want to lie, but you want to put yourself out there and put your folks and their accomplishments and their duties out there in a very strong way, just like this one does. And you see at the bottom, $10 million worth of contracts, and it's hard for us on the flying side normally to get those levels of numbers like they can on the acquisitions and space side, but we still want to put in money when we can in those figures. The bottom, you can see there's a staff job, communicates very specifically folks that he has supervisory authority over, and the scope and level of organization that he's dealing with. So if you go up to the Joint Forces Headquarters here in Mississippi, there should be some broad scope, state level impact, interfacing with the national level, and that should come out very clearly to show the scope and breadth and depth of your responsibilities. Questions on duty description? Okay. When you need to rewrite it. For the past 10 years, I've rewritten every duty description that's been handed to me from the last guy. Why? Because I thought it could be written better. All it does is sum up the jobs you've had. So here, this guy, an ADO, F-16 evaluator pilot, he had 4 jobs during the rating period. He had the ADO job as bullet 1, the F-16 guy, the bullet 2. He did a 179 ADOS tour at the Guard Bureau. Very important to capture those additional type of jobs and duties that aren't going to be listed in the duty description, especially higher headquarters things. So that's 1 bullet. And then if you reference a prior duty job, an accomplishment from a prior duty from the beginning of the rating period before you get CRO'd or PCA'd, then you list the prior duty bullet as well. So you say, well, man, Travis, TD, what I'm doing right now works just fine. And I'd say, well, just because you can doesn't mean you should. So common sense should prevail here, and you can do it my way or the wrong way. You can choose which way you want to do it, okay? Okay, so here we go. Then the step 6, you're looking at the Yaga lines. Now, if you're going to be a slacker, if you're going to take and totally disregard everything else I'm saying, do not be a slacker on this step. This step is where you're going to put the most effort in. And I'm going to give you a scientific formula to plug in to craft these lines. So Yaga stands for You're a Great American. These are the top and bottom lines of the Raiders block, so line 1 and line 6, and additional Raider block, line 1 and line 4. So this is how they're going to be crafted. And when I look at an OPR, I looked at it holistically. That's why I included so much talking about the duty description, because oftentimes those things get written as an afterthought. The whole form should take everything you've done and should be tried to be made as strong as possible. And the way it should go is you should put the strongest material, your best stuff, the stuff that separates you from your peers in these lines. So first of all, let's talk about the top line. My technique for constructing the top line is this. I start out with an award, so award being CGO of the year, maybe you won some kind of functional award, maybe you're with a squadron Saigon award winner, something like that. Start out with an award and then look at a zinger. A zinger is a 1 to 5 word little intro phrase to try to capture the qualities of the raidee as best you can, the best qualities to give a good strong word picture for that individual. And then I finish up with the best and most powerful accomplishment that the individual has during the rating period. So it's kind of a hybrid. Sometimes bullets are used to where they're just all fluff. You use all nice word picture zinger stuff. And the bullet doesn't have any meat, so it just ends up being a fluff bullet that doesn't tell me really anything. So that's why you want to use the hybrid. Start out with some meat, a little bit of word picture, and then try to finish off with a strong bullet. So these are a little bit difficult to see, but if you flip open to page 3, you'll see some top line examples. The ones we're going to go through, you can definitely read them on your paper if you can't read them on your screen. So here's one. I've led no finer officer. Strong words or not strong words? That's a strong statement. If I read that, that would convey meaning to me in a positive way. Much more so than saying silver, whatever, platinum, whatever, gold, whatever kind of words that we use that perhaps get overused and don't convey the meaning we'd like, or rock solid, or whatever. If I can talk about combat, of course I will. If there's a big award that one of your folks wins, then we want to capture that very clearly. So here you can see big MAGCOM level award. You can see some stratification tied along with that to go, this is how many folks he beat out in order to do the award, in order to get this award. Now, stratification is a challenge. In the Guard, I realize, because of some of nobody moves, nobody leaves. But there is one instance where it's very active duty like when it comes to the PCS cycle, and that's on a deployment. So a number of you said you had deployed in the past few years. When you go downrange, you're chopped downrange to the theater, you're chopped to a deployed commander, and that deployed commander gets the opportunity, whether you go for 60 days or 90 days or whatever, to write you a deployed letter of evaluation. It's not an official part of your record. It doesn't stay in your record unless you are a squadron group and wing commander downrange. Then you get a mandatory LOE, and that's different. But for most of us, we'll get optional LOEs, and on that deployment, your deployed squadron commander, even if it's from this unit. So your airlift squadron commander deploys and he becomes an EAS commander. He goes downrange. Now he puts on a different hat. He's a totally different dude altogether. And he shows up a different dude when he gets back home. So that means he can say, you're my number one of 48 deployed aircraft commanders. Or you're my number one of 10 majors in the deployed environment. You get that stratification, put it on the LOE, and then you can peel that off the LOE, put it in quotes, and run it directly into the OPR. And once everybody gets back home after 60 days, everybody, new day, new jet, everybody gets to start all over on the stratification thing again. Does that make sense to everybody? So that is the way that the RegAF guys use liberally, and the reg allows us to do that in order to get more stratification. Here, another award, my most professional officer. Then that's a good strong statement. Kind of a summary of some of the awesome things the guy has done, and maybe that's expanded upon in some of the other bullets in the middle. Again, some more deployed stuff. You kind of get the idea. So that's the top line. Now let's look at the bottom line. Again, the most important part of the form. Bottom line, start out with a stratification, if warranted, if merited. Get a word picture, and then you're going to use the push. The push is going to be threefold. Your next job, command, and a push for PME. So let's look very specifically about how we're going to craft these. These two lines, rater and additional rater, most important lines on the form. These bottom lines. And the reason they're the most important is because this is what boards read. Boards do not have time to read your entire record cover to cover. They will flip through your record and read the top and bottom lines and move on. So, with that in mind, why is it important to review the previous OPR's Yaga lines? Exactly. So you don't write the same stuff twice. So if I say something like innovative and creative leader, 2-3 years in a row, the exact same, very special, very specific words, that is at the very least low SA. And at the most, you may be trying to send me a message to just go, hey, this guy wasn't worth my time to write a whole new OPR for him, so I just cut and paste it from last year's. So those are the kind of messages that poor OPRs send to RegAF colonels who are deciding your fate, and Guard colonels for that matter. So remember that 4 years ago, there may be 4 years difference in between when a Yaga line was written and the report was signed, but that time differential is about 15 seconds to a board member quickly flipping through a record. Does that make sense to everybody? So that's kind of how it works. All right, so let's look through how stratification is done. Now, with stratification, I give you a one-pager in the back of the guide that we're going to post online that gives you tips and trades for stratification, gives you some thoughts about how to stratify and kind of the rule set to work with. And then I also cut and pasted some of the AFI in the back of my guide that shows you the exact wording of the AFI and the rules that are there. So let me just hit a few highlights. First of all, saying number 1 of 21 CGOs, that is strong. Saying my number 1 CGO, that is worthless. That is totally worthless. What it conveys is that there was either only one guy or you didn't do the homework to figure out how many dudes you had, and so it just has to be summarily discarded. And boards on all sides, at the Guard Bureau and on the RegAv side, give us that feedback continually. So you want to quantify all stratification. Every piece of stratification should be quantified. You also want to make peer comparisons only. So I want to try to compare majors to majors, CGOs to CGOs, ADOs to ADOs if I'm stratifying via job. When I don't make peer comparisons, it loses a little bit, gets a little bit watered down. When I go, hey, this is my number 1 of 200 officers, and it's Colonel Wall writing that on his Vice Wing Commander's OPR. Well, I should hope that the dude, that the dude could beat out that the first lieutenant wasn't working down the squadron, right? You should hope that. So you got to think about how you convey meaning, and you convey meaning via peer comparison. When we look at about speeding, speeding means you give the same stratification at the same time to 2 different people. That's what speeding is, and you don't want to do that. You don't want to dilute your signature. You don't want to put your senior leaders in a position where they've signed a report to where it comes up later and on boards, and I've been in rooms and seen this happen, to where an 06 looks at another 06 and holds up 2 reports and goes, this was in 1 week with each other, the exact same strats, your signature on it, tell me what the deal is. And there's an awkward silence in the room, and then a fight breaks out normally, and then it just goes downhill from there. And those 2 records, both of them, get downgraded. So that's why you don't want to speed. You do want to use, try to push your top 20 to 25% hard. Now we do have a no PCS challenge in the Guard. Let me explain to you how it works on the RegAF side. On the RegAF side, a squadron group or wing commander at most spends 2 years in the seat. He rolls in, spends a year and a half, 2 years in the seat, and then leaves. And he takes all his stratification with him. New day, new jet, new commander comes in, he gets to stratify guys how he wants. Commensurate with that, you also have RegAF guys that are PCS in every 3 to 4 years. So by the time it all works out, only 1 or 2 reports are linked to holding a stratification given. For you, in this unit, it may be 4 or 5 years that you're stuck with the stratification you give. So understand how that could be challenging, and that's why I would use upgrades. So when a guy's on the eve of becoming a lieutenant colonel, he's a prime candidate to get maybe a strong stratification as a major, because when he pins on lieutenant colonel, now you get that stratification back. Does that make sense to everybody? Then that's kind of how it works. You want to use rank, AFSC, and job to give you more turning room, and we'll talk more specifically about that in a minute. Subpools are weaker, but you definitely want to use them, and I'll show you some subpool examples in just a few moments to make sure that you're looking at really your top 20, 25% of the organization that are getting some kind of consistent stratification. So, let's do a quick strat test. Thumbs up, thumbs down for these. Good or bad? Bad. Why? Don't know how many there are. It's not quantified. Yep. How about this one? Good or bad? Very good. It's very good. And this one, and who said very good? That you're exactly right. This is very good. This is great because squadron commanders, normally lieutenant colonels, sometimes some majors mixed in there on the support side, but to be a lieutenant colonel, you make a certain cut. Normally, to be a squadron commander, you've made the next cut. So because you've made that next cut, you get into a pool just like this is, where the squadron commander pool is even more competitive than the lieutenant colonel one. So in a big RegAF wing, like if you go over to Charleston or other places in the MAF, for instance, this is what normally, when I was working at 18th Air Force, I would see on the fastest burning lieutenant colonel in that wing. This would be the stratification the wing commander would give him or her. So this is a very good, very strong stratification. How about this one? Good or bad? Why? And it's outside the scope, right? Because this is a squadron commander saying he is stratifying dudes at the wing level. He's concluding all the guys in the wing, which is outside the scope of his responsibility. Now, there is a caveat to this. If the wing commander is a signatory on the report, i.e. he signs as the reviewer, and he allows the squadron commander to put this in his block, it would be allowed because he is by default blessing it when he signs the form. Does that make sense? That is a caveat that has been put out there in the new iterations of the AFI. Good or bad for this one? All right, this one, standard val 05, how many dudes do you rate as a standard val 05? Probably not many, right? Maybe just a couple. So you have a limited pool by which to compare and stratify folks. You can use historical stratification. I would save historical stratification, just like this one is, for higher ranking folks. And it's where you take and inject yourself a little bit into the report. So you're talking about how many dudes you've rated and supervised, and then stratify from that bigger pool. So this is good. This is the best the guy could do. If the guy thinks he's really strong, I wouldn't put historical stratification on every report, but for your best guys, this is a way, if you don't have a big pool of folks to work from, this is a way to get a guy a good strat. How about this one? Good or bad? Yeah, so this one's fine. This one is a sub-pool. So it's where I'm sitting up here as a group commander, and I look down and maybe I have maintenance and ops guys that work for me, in theory. So I look and I go, all right, I have my number one guy as a maintenance guy, but I have a bunch of ops guys too, so I could do a sub-pool and compare all the ops 04s and get a number one for this guy. It's a weaker strat, but it is a way to get some meaningful, high-ranking numbers there if you wanted. How about this one? Good or bad? What? Why is this bad? This is stupid math. This is why this is bad, because this is stupid math. So what would number one of 20 be? How many percentage points would that be? Anything from top 1 to top 5% of 20 is number one. So you would put number one. Normally when you see dudes do this, it's because they gave their number one to somebody else and they're trying to speed without looking like they're speeding. So if you're going to use percentages, make sure that they pass the math check. You may have to go to a math major. Aren't you a PhD, ma'am? You might go to the general here and go, you're a PhD, can you check this math for me? However you're going to work that out, just make sure that the math makes sense, okay? Is this good or bad? So if maybe there's no more strat left, because not everyone can be number one, and it's not my intent for you to make everyone number one. That's not possible. Mathematically, that is not possible. But you could use strong word pictures like this one to convey meaning. All right, the push. We're going to talk about the last half of the lines. And again, we're spending a lot of time talking about push lines, talking about the top and bottom lines, these Yaga lines, because they're the most important part of the form. They're the part that boards will read. They won't read the rest of it under most circumstances. Doesn't mean the rest of it isn't important, because there are times when folks will read the entire form. But these are the most important parts. So here's how pushes work. It's current grade plus 1. That means Lieutenant Colonel Odom is a lieutenant colonel. She's an 05. That's her current grade. Plus 1 means 06. So I can make pushes in the grade of 05 and maybe perhaps and then in the grade of 06 as well when we consider these pushes. So first of all, I look at school, PME, IDE, SD. So don't get cosmic here. Choose one of these three and plug it in. Primary developmental education, ID, intermediate developmental education for majors, and then for lieutenant colonels, they get SD, senior developmental education. In residence is assumed. Now, I know that this is a little bit foreign to most of our guard folks, but here's how it works on the RegAF side. I go to do correspondence PME so I get a better shot at in-residence PME. So we just bring the pain on just because we love the pain on the RegAF side, I guess. But that's the way it goes. So when you're looking at correspondence, all you have to do is have a pulse and wear the rank, and you can go to do the correspondence course, because that's the way it works. When we're making pushes for competitively selective processes. In residence is always a competitively selective process. So that's why you don't need to use the words in residence, and you choose from these three, no others. Command, here are your choices for command. So you always want to push the guy or gal for the next level of command. Flight commander, squadron commander, group commander, vice commander, commander. Finally, the top two are pretty clean kills for folks who are deserving of strong pushes. We want to also use that next job very specific to the officer. For younger guys, lieutenants, captains, maybe brand new majors, I like giving, for your rated folks, an aircraft type of push. The next upgrade, so that this is a kind of a CAF progression in the math, it would be co-pilot goes to AC, goes to IP, goes to EP. That's how the math side works. So you make those pushes for the upgrade for the younger guys. Older guys wouldn't worry about it. Immediate next office job, you could say on a brand new lieutenant colonel's report, by next DO, future squadron CC, that would be okay. Now, this is one that's also kind of foreign to most Guard folks because of the way your system works, a little different than the RegAF system. We always do staff pushes for FGOs if they're warranted and if they're deserving. So MAGCOM, HAF, COCOM, JCS or OSD, Office of the Secretary of Defense, those are the progression of pushes that a RegAF guy would get. So at some point, maybe you push for your field grade officers, maybe your joint forces headquarters push, perhaps, so a joint staff type of billet. Just to convey, this individual's doing great work, they are worthy of doing something outside the wing. Now, some of you will apply cuckoo guard logic to what I just said. And what you will do is you will say, you know what? Joe Bob here, really, he doesn't want to go to ID in residence or SD in residence. He doesn't want to do anything but hang out here in the great state of Mississippi, drink iced tea and everything be good. He doesn't want to go, so I'm not going to push him. Wrong answer. You are making a push based on your reality, based on current circumstances, based on personal situations in the individual's life, and you don't want to do that. You want to take his performance or her performance, you want to take potential, and then decide the pushes based on those two factors alone. And let me just tell you that just because you push a guy for IDE doesn't mean he's going. It's a separate process entirely that the individual has to apply for in order to go to IDE or SD. So that's when he gets the vote about whether or not he wants to go, if he applies or not. Same thing for command. Some of you will go, well, there's really not a command slot available in the next 3 years that we see, so I'm just not going to push him. No. Make the pushes the individual's earned, and then the system will take care of itself. Does anybody have any questions on that? Okay. So, if you'll flip open to your form, again, on those words, page 3, instead of reading these off, I'm just going to take 1 minute and give you the opportunity to digest these lines. So you'll see in the top where I've written, hey, here is where the individual falls out, here is who is rating them, here's who's writing this push line, and give you some examples of strong push lines based on where officers are in their career. So if you can see the screen, great. If you can't, you can take a look at the handout. Promotion pushes on OPRs are prohibited. Promotion pushes on EPRs are a necessity for your strong dudes, and if they are merit promotions. So EPR system, OPR system, totally different. On one of our last slides, I'm going to run through very quickly and tell you the differences in the system just to give you a way to cage your mind for those of you who rate both officer and enlisted. It is confusing, I understand, but there's a reason the system is different, and it's because of how the RegAF promotes enlisted folks and how the RegAF promotes officers, and so that necessitates a difference in the way performance reports are written. All right, so you can definitely take the handout, digest some more later on. We'll move on. Does anybody have any more questions on Yaga lines before we do?
I used to see, challenge with increased responsibility, those lines all the time. Is that no longer a player?
And if you want me not to promote the guy, say challenge with increased responsibility, and I won't promote him. Okay, that's what a RegAF guy. It tells me this guy wasn't worth making a specific push. So ready for increased responsibility, challenge with a tough assignment. Those are weak pushes, are things that are sending a negative message to the board. Okay, then the push. Let me be very, very clear here. What are we going to push for? I'm going to fly through this very quick and just allow you to digest. Okay, see how this works? Let's try another one. Okay, so what are you going to push this guy for? 04, Maintenance Ops Officer in Residence IDE grad. You're going to push for, first of all, the job is going to be Maintenance Squadron Commander. Push him for SDE. Why? Because there are two ways to get upgraded to the next school push. One is by completing the in-residence program. The second is by being outside the window of eligibility to go. So when you get to be a really senior major on the eve of Lieutenant Colonel, you're outside the eligibility window. Reg-Af guys get 3 looks, 3 years. And then for Lieutenant Colonels, it's a 4-year, 4-look type of process on the Reg-Af side. So once you get outside that window of eligibility, then you can start pushing for the next thing. And of course, staff push varies, but Headquarters Air Force would be a good push here. All right, so here we go. How about this one? What job am I going to push for? Yep. And then you're still going to push for SDE because he may have completed by correspondence, but that's not what the push is for. The in-residence is what the push is for. And then some kind of staff push. All right, 06, OG Commander. What are you going to push for? Pushing for a Wing Vice Commander Command. Pushing for some kind of higher headquarters staff. And for 06s, they're outside the window for SDE in residence, so you're not going to make any kind of school push at all. All right, can I watch your words? So there are some things we want to be very careful at saying. Should I say best young officer ever seen? Good or bad? I can't say that because I cannot make comments on race, gender, religion, and this is age. So this is an age one. So what you mean to say is best junior officer is normally what this means. So substitute the word young for junior. Can I say this? Nope, I can't say this because I can't talk about being nominated for a decoration. I can in an awards package, I cannot on an OPR. If you actually were awarded a Bronze Star, knock yourself out. Put it in there and make it impactful, all that sort of thing, but not nominations. How about this one? Filling a Lieutenant Colonel billet? No, because that is an implied promotion statement. So sometimes if you get carried away, you can make implied promotion statements, which is different from pushing that current grade or current grade +1 to the logical next step for the individual. So you cannot say this on an OPR. The reg is very clear about that. How about this one? Nope, can't say this either because senior in the Air Force isn't a term for 06 and above. That's a senior officer. So basically you are making an implied promotion statement here as well. How about this one, good or bad? Yeah, I had this early in my OPR. You want to be careful about the unintended message you might send. So this one, the question that pops up in a Reg-Af 06's mind is normally, well, they got a lot of potential, but does that mean they're really not using a lot of that potential? Is that what that means? This is what that kind of says. So think through the second and third order effects of words you use. Ready for increased responsibility, good or bad? I just told you it's bad. Yeah, don't use that one. Substitute that being the standard guard push for the things I just told you to push for, okay? Then that's what you want to do. How about this one? Good or bad? Oh yeah, this is the good old kiss of death on a Reg-Af report, so you don't want to push like this. How about this one? He's a Lance Armstrong of the Command Post Ops. Now, a couple years ago, this one would have had a much different meaning than it does right now. A few years ago, you all wouldn't have laughed. It would have just been another, all right, well, this guy's an awesome Tour de France winning dude. Must be. That's all we're saying. So now, though, I have to ask myself, did the guy fail a urinalysis test or something? How about this one? He's the David Petraeus of the Mississippi Air National Guard. I mean, a year ago, that would have had a much different meaning because, let me tell you, the guy, I mean, you just can't agree. The guy is a phenomenal general, did one of the greatest soldiers of our generation. He made a mistake. And so what you don't want to do is have an individual who makes a mistake negatively influence your ratee or your report for that matter. So I never use specific names. I always use offices or job titles. So if I'm talking about General Petraeus, I don't talk about General Petraeus. I talk about CENTCOM Commander. Does that make sense? And that means years from now, if a guy makes a mistake or their name begins to send a different message, it doesn't dilute the report. It doesn't negatively affect your rate E. All right, let's talk about the 2 degrees of bad and 3 degrees of good, because at this point, we've gone through the Yaga lines, the most important part, and what oftentimes folks will ask me is go, okay, I kind of get the sense about how to take care of my number 1 guy. I got that. Why don't you tell me how to take care of the other 90% of the guys in my squadron? And so this is how you're going to do it. You want to use this piece of paper, this OPR, to convey properly where your folks fall in the rack and stack. So here's a unit personnel rack and stack, kind of notional, broken up by percentages. So let me walk you through it. First of all, it's your first tier. These are your strongest dudes. 1 or 2 dudes per squadron, 6 or 7 guys per wing. These are your number 1 straight out dudes. They're the guys that are going to be your A-tag, tag dudes one day, definitely wing commander potential. Those are the kind of strength of guys we're talking about. And there's not much room at the top. Not everybody can fit in this category. Very, very few guys. Next is your second tier dudes. These are the guys that perhaps because they're just, the tier 1 guys are just better than they are, that's why they're not tier 1 guys. These are the guys that are your leaders, the guys that are running your ops, the guys that are your go-to folks, that are really making your unit hum. These are the folks. So those are your second tier dudes. So let's talk about the 3rd degree of good, which is where, mathematically speaking, at least half of us in this room, this is where we sit, and that's average Joes. These are the guys that may need just a little bit more supervision, but they're hard workers, they get the job done, they're not getting in trouble, and they're great performers. This is the middle of the pack. And for both RegAF and Guard, the vast majority of people, fall in the 3 degrees of good. We have awesome folks on all the components from what I've seen. The bottom, lower 20%, these are your weak swimmers. These are folks that perhaps don't get in trouble, but they don't really have that strong in the performance category either. Maybe you have to follow up with them continually in order to get the job done. These are kind of weak swimmer folks. And then you have the bottom 5%, the folks that have gotten in trouble in some way. Now, what I don't want you to do with this chart is decide in your mind, for those of you who are squadron commanders and above, where dudes fit, and now it's done, and it's going to stay that way forever. Let me ask you a question. Have you ever known anybody throughout your Air Force career who was up there in the top and then made a mistake, and then they had to take a penalty lap at the bottom and in trouble to get a referral EPR or OPR, and then over the course of a few years, if they make good choices and right decisions and show their true character, that they make it back up to the upper echelons again. So don't think of this as a static thing. You also want to make sure that your squadron may be a little bit lower on the weak swimmers, a little bit higher on the average Joes, but this is kind of notional. So now, using this chart, I want to show you how to use the tools that are on the EPR to take care of all the folks you can take care of. So first of all, we have our best strats, which I'm going to break down for you in a minute. Those go to your first tier guys, your very best stratifications. So let me just say, if you have your number 1 guy is a major, and you got another top guy in your squadron or group who's a lieutenant colonel, the thing you're going to put on the report is probably, this is my 1 of 15 majors. And the lieutenant colonel, this is my 1 of 10 lieutenant colonels, because that's the best strat you can get. Straight up strat all the way around. Your good strats, so maybe your number 2s, number 3s, those sub-pool strats, maybe some historical strats. These are going to be your second tier guys, and you may be able to have enough strat left over to make it down into the top part of the average Joe. Awards. Awards being CGO of the Year, Lance Saigon Awards. These are awards you can use all the way down, and the Guard, traditionally, we underutilize the awards that are available out there. A lot of RegAF units are really maximizing all the awards they have. In fact, they make extra awards at the unit level. At DIAS, we had a Superior Performer of the Month. We made up extra awards at the local level in order to get guys more awards. So awards are important because they show a break in distinction from your peer group. So maybe you can make it down into the yellow for the award. Strong word pictures you can definitely use down into the average Joe category. Your most dependable CGO may not be your best one, but he's your most dependable one, and that communicates something that's positive and strong to me as a guy that reads a lot of these reports. Pushes. Pushes can go all the way, top 75%. So all 3 degrees of good should get strong pushes. Your strongest pushes should go to your top guys, but very strong, good pushes can go all the way through the average Joe chain as well. And then accomplishments, you get down into weak pushes and the weak swimmers, and then accomplishments, though, everybody that does good stuff, you capture accomplishments on everybody's report regardless of where they fell on the continuum. Okay, so that's the way you break it down. This is just for you to take a moment to digest. I normally focus on number 1, 2, 3, top 10% stratification or better. Here's just a smattering example. So you can see when I think about strat, I go rank, AFSC, and job. I break it up in those categories, and then what I do is after I get through those pure categories, I always leave a little bit left over, and I go, all right, I got some historical strat I could use. Maybe I have some subpools where I can make sure that my top, no kidding, my top 25% of the folks get stratified. Now let me just make this very clear. Not everybody can get a strat. In fact, what I'm saying is 70-75% of your organization probably won't. That's just how it works. That's how stratification goes. So it seems like, man, 25-30% of the people, that's a lot. But we're shaving off 2/3 of the organization that's not going to end up on a number on most of their reports. So that's kind of how we work this game, and that's how the RegAF guys do that as well. So here's an example. You have a civilian guy who's done Six Sigma or lean training, which is not only an Air Force thing, but that's like an industry thing. Well, I would take that accomplishment and go, all right, this guy went to civilian, corporate world, Six Sigma training. I would bring him over here. He shows up to UTA weekend, have him spend 30 minutes looking at a process improvement, which is what Six Sigma, that lean, what those processes do within the wing, so it relates to military performance in the military position. And now you have a strong bullet. You've taken what the guy has done in the civilian world, and you have equated it and linked it to the military to have military impact. Does that make sense to everybody?
It does, yeah.
So that cannot be done with everything, and you have to be careful on how you use that, but that's the way to connect the dots. It does require some extra thinking and some extra planning and effort, but that's the way you can hook up your traditionals that are CEOs and CFOs and general managers out there in the civilian world and bring that leadership home to you here in the Guard. You can also use volunteer service, especially for those of you who are CGOs, to have a volunteer service bullet in there, whether you teach Sunday school or do things like that. Those are acceptable. I would definitely use those on EPRs. I would use them sparingly on OPRs. Field grade officer and above, I'd probably leave out the purely civilian volunteer service. But that's kind of how I'd bring in my civilian experience and civilian accomplishments. Does anybody have any more questions on those? Great question, ma'am. Okay. So let's wrap it up. Let's just look at some examples from an A&G wing when I went through some OPRs for them. Is this good or bad? Bad because there's no peer comparison. How about this one? Good or bad? It's bad. Perhaps is not the strongest word, but it's really bad because you use 25, 24 characters and spaces to say something I could have said in 5. OG/CC. So that is what I'm talking about when I'm talking about the radio call, condensing it. Good or bad? Take out in resonance. In resonance is implied. This is the top line of a lieutenant colonel's OPR. Good or bad? Yeah, I am stupider for having read this bullet, aren't I? It says nothing to me at all. It truly conveys nothing and will convey nothing to any type of selective, competitively selective process. So you want to avoid using all fluff type of sentences like this in your OPRs. Good or bad? It's good and bad. You can't specify what kind of IDE, so you have to take out the word joint because there's a different process to determine what kind of IDE or SDE you get selected for. So you just say IDE, and the push at the end is good for a staff push for a guard guy. Good or bad? So this one not the best. I'm conflicted, and you could take your DSG and use that as a subpool, But really, I have to ask myself what kind of message we send to RegAF guys when we go, you know what, we have our A-game full-time guys over here, and then we have, all these DGSGA guys over here. So I don't know that message is the best to send, although you could do it, and it's legal. The real problem with this bullet, though, is you're taking dudes, in this instance, dudes from captain to lieutenant colonel and comparing them together. So it's really not a peer comparison, and it makes it a little bit more challenging. I probably use some strong words to try to wake you up and jolt you a little bit to go, the SecAF is saying this is the standard, and that's it. However, then I've been in the RegAF for a long time, and even I understand. And everybody who's going to look at your records on the RegAF side that sit on guard boards, they get a big briefing that starts out at the beginning to go, all right, traditional guard folks have 30 days a year. They don't work in the unit most of the time, and so they're made to understand how that goes, and that is a consideration. And it is something that the system considers, and it is amazing what traditionals do and manage basically 2 careers when I, for my entire life, have only had to manage 1. So it's definitely a consideration. My thought there is to make sure that we don't separate out pools that may send negative messages. I don't think this one does. It is something you could do, and I think it could be a positive stratification. So I will clarify my statements there. And so there are interpreters, there are ways, and then you have people there in the room to explain to RegAF dudes what happens in the guard. However, a weak record ends up being a weak record no matter which way you skin it. And so even though the guy can go, this guy really is awesome, the Secretary of the Air Force goes, but you had 10 pieces of paper that said he wasn't awesome at all. What am I supposed to do with that? And so that's our challenge. Must for in-residence PME, got to take out the in-residence, and you can't say PME, you need to make a specific push. Choose one of the 3 that I gave you. How about this one? It is prohibited by AFI. You cannot talk about attendance at completion of advanced academic degrees and OPRs. Okay, Super 6 bullets as we wind this thing down to the end. These are the bullets that are in the middle of the Yaga line. So the 4 middle bullets of the Raider block and the 2 middle bullets of the additional Raider block. And let me just say that for those of you who write EPRs, bullets are written pretty much the same. I mean, this is pretty much the same construct. I briefed them almost the exact same thing I'm briefing you this morning. So you start out with an optional zinger. Zinger, 1 to 5 word, little outstanding leader, great warrior, combat vet. I always use zingers sparingly because oftentimes they don't add a lot of meat to the line, but you could use them if you wanted. I would suggest sparingly. Start out with an action word, develop, implement it, led, direct it, those types of things. Say an accomplishment, hit that up, and then quantifiable impact to the highest level. So you want to state bullets as clearly, concisely, and specifically as possible, just like we talked about with duty description, using lots of numbers, making radio calls, not having conversations. And then oftentimes what lacks when I read guard OPRs is the impact at the end. You tell me what you did, but you don't really tell me why it mattered, what it actually did, what the impact was to the organization. So you want to talk about how you improve the mission, combat readiness, execution, and if possible, make sure you quantify it with very specific numbers and take that to the highest level. So a good way to do this is to think everybody's written a decoration or seen a decoration citation, how we put words in sentences. Oftentimes those sentences are taken directly from OPRs. And so if you can't take a sentence and convert it, or take a bullet rather, and convert it into a strong sentence, X, developed this accomplishment that resulted in whatever the impact was, then perhaps the bullet should be rewritten to be able to do that better. That's just one of the tests you can use. So now I'm going to give you 8 ways to show impact. Very specifically, when you have an accomplishment that you come up with, you run through these 8 ways, and these 8 things, you'll be able to probably get a good impact statement at the end. First of all, it's COCOM. So what it matters is what we do that has impact on the mission, the combatant command. That could be Transcom, that could be deployed, that could be home station sitting here, how you're impacting the combatant command mission. Say things like, you know, you met the CENTCOM CC goals. A lot of times we talk about, hey, we dropped 100 tons of airdrop mission stuff with the C-17. Okay, well, great. What was the impact? Maybe you helped achieve some kind of CENTCOM objective. So that's what I say when I mean take it to the highest level. A lot of the impact you have may be squadron level, but I guarantee many of the things you're doing have wing, state, national, and international or global impact as well. Maybe you're sitting at home and you enable some warfighters. So for you MSG guys, maybe you're helping send guys out the door, and we want to talk about that in terms of operational requirements in combat. Higher headquarters. So there's a lot of written policy that comes out of the White House, DOD, Air Force level, Guard Bureau, and if you can tie what you're doing to higher headquarters objectives in written policy, those are great. So we've all heard about the President of the United States focused on the Pacific. So this is a good impact. If you take a mission, fly over to the Pacific, do anything that shows that we're kind of transitioning there in a focus of our new AOR, that's a great impact. Perhaps you took place or took part in the morale and readiness inspections where we make sure there's no inappropriate items in our open areas. That's happened recently across the Air Force based on CSAF direction. Well, that could be one where you implemented the inspection in your squadron, and then the result is that the CSAF message got out to your entire squadron. You kind of see how we do that? So when you see a CSAF vision statement come out, those type of things, if you can tie it to what you're doing at the higher levels, that would be great. Mission stats, ops, maintenance, all kinds of mission numbers always make great impacts. It gives you a number, and it's hardcore, irrefutable, good substance and meat for mission stats. Savings, if you can talk about saving money, saving resources, saving manpower, those type of things, you want to quantify that as best you can and put that in a bullet. For aviators who take care of some kind of emergency in the air, the common bullet is that you saved the number of lives on board and you saved however expensive a C-17 is. Also, anything that is a first ever type of situation, maybe you stood up the first unit QA program, maybe you flew the first combat ops in Libya, anything that's truly a first ever, you want to make sure you convey that very clearly in the impact. That makes a strong impact. Anything where you start out to do the first ever. Number 6, direct comparison. So this is where we compare what you did to the Air Force average, the national average, the AMC standard, what the requirement is, and how we compared when we did it. So maybe that means we came in below average, but because that's a good thing. Maybe it's we fell above average. Maybe we exceeded the requirements. All those things make strong impacts on the higher levels. Senior leader words. So we've had some generals that visit bases. When I was on the AMC commander's staff, I would put together trip books for him to go out and visit all kinds of Guard units. So when General Selva, who's the AMC commander, touches down at your base and starts walking around, you need to have somebody following that dude around to take notes on what he says. I vote for Lieutenant Colonel Odom. I think she would be great. So have Lieutenant Colonel Odom follow him around, and when he walks through your maintenance, crew, whatever, tool shop, and he looks and he goes, "Great job," and then keeps walking along, Odom's behind him going, "Great job," quote. And then you take that and you roll that over here to the maintenance officers OPR and all those dudes at EPRs. 4-star said, "Great job." AMC CC, "Great job." Does that make sense? It sounds this side of hee-haw funny and ridiculous, but that's how the Reg-Af guys roll. 4-star generals, political officials, when they make big statements, it shows good impact. Does that make sense to everybody? Any type of official award or recognition, we use the big awards, and we put the big awards in the Yaga lines. But the smaller awards, like some kind of team award where you weren't the team leader, you were just kind of there, those could be good impacts. Anytime you get coined by a senior general officer, that could be a good impact. And especially for enlisted guys, you want to soak up any time they get a coin or win any kind of team award, you want to make sure that that gets written into their EPRs. Any type of UCI excellent, ORI outstanding, those type of results can be captured as strong impacts. You just got to make sure when your DSG shows up that they touch that accomplishment, so you'll have something to write in the beginning of what they did in order to receive that impact. Does that make sense? So these are the 8 ways that you can show impact. And if you run through these 8 ways in your mind, when you look at all your accomplishments, you'll be able to come up with some strong impact that will be meaningful and substantive for your OPR. Now you can flip open and just see a few examples on your sheet on page 3. Screen's a little bit hard to read, but this just runs through and gives you examples of bullets from all different kinds of AFSCs. You'll notice a few things. You'll notice that there's a whole lot of numbers. You'll notice there's a whole lot of acronyms and abbreviations, because remember, we're ticked off that they didn't give us enough space, so we're trying to cram as much in as possible. And then you'll also notice a lot of punctuation, a lot of slashes, a lot of semicolons, a lot of double dashes, in order to make it radio call-like, to cram in as much as possible. Then you're going to do an intentionality check. The intentionality check is going to be this. Did you write the OPR as strong or as weak as you wanted it to be? On purpose. So up until now, many Guard OPRs in the unit have probably been written unintentionally weak. So now when you write, you're making an intentional decision to make the OPR weak, because you're intentionally deciding to leave out pushes. You're intentionally deciding to put ready for increased responsibility or whatever. Does that make sense? So I want you to do an intentionality check. I don't want you to write every report strong. I want you to give your people what they rightly deserve based on potential and performance. Does everybody understand that? So intentionality check, very important at this point. Then I want you to go take a nap. And this is not a requirement, just a way that I gauge whether or not the OPR was written strongly and concisely. N stands for numbers. A stands for acronyms and abbreviation. P stands for punctuation. So here's what I do. This is the last OPR that I wrote a few weeks ago for a guy. 18 numbers in the lines. I had 68 acronyms and abbreviations that I used in 14 lines, and I had 59 items of punctuation, semicolons, double dashes. So here's how it goes. The dash on the front doesn't count. There's a space that goes after the dash, and then there's your strong action word or zinger. From that point on, from where the first word starts all the way to the end, count how many items of punctuation you have. Again, there's no requirement, but if your numbers are a whole lot lower than mine are here, then you need to look at how you can make that report stronger to make sure it's radio call-like, you're packing it in and giving as much meat as possible to your raidee for their performance. Now we're going to talk about promotion recommendation files later. I know many of you have probably not written those, but it's 9 lines to sum up an entire career. And if you don't have anything that's worthy to go in a PRF in your OPR, then as you build the Raiders record, brick by brick, OPR by OPR, as you build that house, if you will, then that's one brick that doesn't help me get the guy promoted on his PRF. So we're going to talk more about that later for those lieutenant colonels and above that will attend that session. But when you look at, if there's no strat, if there's no awards, if there's nothing that's huge in the accomplishment realm, then maybe you intended it to be that way. If you didn't, then you want to look at making a plan for the next time around to set up your raidee better. Get a trusted peer review as these things begin to matter more and more. Squadron commanders sharing back and forth for squadron commanders, get other folks to look at the reports. I know oftentimes in the Guard construct, there's not these huge administrative staffs at varying levels like on the RegAF side that are reviewing the reports. So a normal OPR for a lieutenant colonel or colonel would normally get screened by 3 or 4 different staffs, admin folks, executive officers, senior officers, many times. And I know you all don't have that robust construct like the RegAF dudes have, so trusted peer reviews can be helpful. Then you put together the OPR package, and let me tell you, if you have your number one guy at your squadron level, or maybe you're a flight commander, this is your number one guy, I would suggest, if you want good stuff in the additional raider block, that you go stand in front of your desk of your squadron commander, group commander, wing commander, and if it is an appropriate course of action for you to make pleads for stratification, and just plead your case and then leave it to them to make the ultimate decision, I would encourage doing that. And it works the same at every level. So here I am, I'm sitting outside the 18th Air Force Commander's desk, and guess what? I work all this OPR. So all the OPRs that come up from the field, I see all of them. And so all of a sudden one day, wing commander rolls in the office, shuts the door, comes back out. He leaves. General Scott walks out and says, TD, put this stratification on this report. So what had happened? The wing commander had gone to plead his case, and he won in front of the general. Okay, so that's the way it works. And if you want to advocate for your people, that's how to best advocate for your people, as long as that is an appropriate and accepted avenue for your boss. So if I get you in trouble with your boss, remember I'm not here in an official capacity. Okay. All right, and sometimes bosses change out, and so for you squadron commanders, it may be necessary to sacrifice one of your flight commanders. Take the one you like the least, have him send up the first report to that new group commander, wing commander, and because it only takes one of us to keep that killer whale busy, then the rest of us get to go swim. All right, remember you're not done when you submit the form. So step 9, we're almost done. Thanks for hanging with me. You're not done yet when you submit it. There's the review processes that occur, and there'll be varying people that looks at the forms, admin people, enlisted maybe some civilian folks. There'll also be some execs maybe that look at it, maybe not. And then, of course, decision makers who sign it will have to look at it. So those varying review processes occur. You get changes kicked back to you. Work those with folks that have comments and inputs. Debrief and signatures. The way I do debriefs for OPRs is the same as I do for EPRs. I print out the form before I send it to the individual. So everything's been signed. Remember, on OPRs and EPRs, the ratie has to sign it. That closes out the form totally. I print it out. I sit down with the ratie, if possible, and I have the debrief. I say, here's your signed report. Do you have any questions? And if it's a bad report, it's not an awesome report, they should kind of know it's coming because they've gotten the feedback, but at least you're looking eye to eye and having meaningful communication with your ratie, which is very important. And then the process doesn't totally finish until the ratie sees it updated in the records electronically on those forms, on those virtual sites that we have. Let me just hit a word about EPR differences. So for EPRs, focus area, target audience is Chief Master Sergeant in the career field versus 06 outside the career field for EPRs. PME pushes, you do not make PME pushes on EPRs. You can talk about awards that they get. Let's say they get a John Levito award out of ALS. That can go on the EPR. In fact, you should definitely put that on the EPR. Those are huge awards. Or you can talk about the Senior Enlisted Joint PME. It's a web-based course that folks can do when they go into the joint environment or get ready to. Those are good, but you can't say, send to Senior NCO Academy. That's not allowed. You, unlike OPRs, on EPRs, you make promotion pushes. Definite for the strong dudes, the dudes that deserve it. Everybody should get a promotion push because that's how their system works. Assignment pushes, you can make assignment pushes. So if you have a tech sergeant that you think needs to be the next first sergeant, that's current grade +1 because first sergeants start out as being master sergeants, so you can make that push. Strat. For EPR, strat is the world of no. So all that stuff we just went through, all those little sub-pools and historical stuff, none of that stuff applies to EPRs. You cannot stratify chiefs or chief master sergeant selects. You cannot stratify tech sergeants or below. The only thing you can do is, for you, take the guys you actually own, the master sergeants and senior master sergeants, and stratify them. So if you own 7 master sergeants, you can put 1 of 7 master sergeants, and you're done. The wing commander can't go down and say, all right, this is my #1 master sergeant in the LOS. That's not allowed. That's a sub-pool, not allowed. You have to deal with the dudes you actually own. Those are the rules. It's very restrictive, but for EPRs, it's very simple. Very simple rules. Senior Rater endorsement. I know this is a foreign concept for many in the Guard, but it's a huge thing on the RegAF side. Senior Rater endorsement is Community College of the Air Force complete, Senior NCO Academy either by correspondence or in residence complete, in order to get Senior Rater endorsement for guys that are Master Sergeants, Senior Master Sergeants, etc. Time and grade eligibility, for those of you familiar with the EPR system, is not applicable for the Air National Guard because our system works differently than the RegAF system. And then I like using fewer flowery words, even less than I like using in the OPRs, and just try to focus on meat. I try to match up the bullets with the categories that are on the front of the 910 and 911. So we had a full-up EPR briefing this morning. A lot of senior enlisted guys were here. I encourage you to sit down and have robust dialogue if you're an additional rater or rater for one of those guys. Final thoughts. For you as a rater, this is your most powerful tool. It's a pen. It has the power to make careers. It has the power to break careers. It has the power to give people more income. It has the power to take away income. It has the power to build happiness and joy in a ratie's life. It has the power to bring them a lot of pain and sadness normally when they bring them on themselves. But this is what pens can do, and this is your most powerful tool. So my question is, how are you going to use that tool? What legacy are you going to leave your ratee? I've had a lot of raters in my career, and I remember some of what they said. I remember some of what they did even. But I remember all of what they wrote about me, because even 10, 15 years later, it still remains in my record, and it will stay there until I retire or separate. So the legacy you leave your ratee is what you sign your name on paper about them. So as I close, I have shaken the cereal box. I have taken out the RegAF decoder ring, the secrets that the RegAF guys have kept from you all for decades, and I have handed it to you right now. And the real question is, what are you going to do with it? So I appreciate your time and attention today.